Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, this is Nerds to Human, and welcome to this campaign strategy guide for the Greek city-states. We're going to have an in-depth look at the faction and try and work out what the best approach at the start of the game is. We're going to dip into the history of the Greek city-states, figure out exactly what this faction is supposed to be, and of course we'll also look at some roleplay. Finally, we will have a good look at the battle strategy too. That will come in a separate video on the Tuesday, just like we did for the previous videos on Carthage. So what exactly is the history of the Greek city-states? Where are they at the start of the game? And to be honest, the more important question is, who even are they? Because they are a very strange faction, aren't they? The Greeks are well known for being all these different warring city-states, always at each other's throats. And yet on this, they're kind of one allied faction. They're almost like the rebel faction, to be honest with you. Very strange indeed. So let's have a little look at these cities and try and work out what's going on. It all comes down to the legacy of Alexander the Great, who died around 50 years before the start of the game. When he died, his empire collapsed with him and broke into several different successor states. The faction of Macedonia represents the Antigonid dynasty, one of the key successor states of Alexander's empire. But the reason he's got so many rebels and all of these Greek city-states sitting around is because they were having trouble at this point holding on to them all. Macedonia was trying to reassert its control over the entirety of the Greek mainland. All of this comes to a head in 267 BC, right at the start of the game, where Sparta and Athens led a coalition of city-states in uprising against Macedonia. In the end, though, they would be crushed. When you consider that the faction basically represents a sort of uprising against Macedonia, the split cities kind of makes sense. Corinth was a massive stronghold of Macedonia, and Termon and Sparta, whilst not connected here, were on the same side. Why then is Athens just a generic rebel? Why is it not part of Sparta and Termon's Greek cities? It is strange in some ways because Athens definitely fought on the same side as these in that particular conflict. But in many ways it also represents what's going on at the time. And it is that it's not really one clear uprising against Macedonia. Everyone's kind of looking out for their own interests, it's just they're all against Macedonia. There's the Achaean League, the Ionian League. Ptolemaic Egypt wants to put its hat in the ring. So does the Seleucids, so does Rome. It becomes a bit of a mess. This is essentially where Pergamum and Rhodes come into it too. During all the conflicts with Macedonia over the coming century, Pergamum and Rhodes would find themselves on the same side as the likes of Sparta, and that's probably where the game has decided to put them all together. But then again, that does bring us over here to Syracuse. What of Syracuse? Syracuse is a bit of an intriguing one because whilst it was obviously a Greek colony and a Spartan colony at that, it wasn't connected really at all, certainly in terms of its political movements. They were allied with Rome during the Second Punic War before they decided to switch side to Carthage. But at the same time, Rome was actually supporting Sparta and its movement against the Antigonid dynasty. So they're not really on the same kind of political standing. They are really very much separate entities at this time. So quite why we've got them connected, I'm not 100% sure. My guess though is probably because it adds an extra dimension to the old Sicily battle here. We want it to be as dynamic as possible. And it definitely makes Sicily an interesting part at the start of the game. Overall then, the Greek city-states are a rather insane faction, although I must say one that is not quite as ahistorical as people often paint it to be. People often say that they should be all separate city-states, why are they all one? But in many ways it does make sense. They did have a joint cause against Macedonia, and about 150 years of their history was them fighting against Macedonian or Antigonid rule. It is well worth remembering that this game is from 2004, and as such there are certain limitations which held them back, particularly when it came to the amount of factions. They may well have wanted to give Pergamum and Rhodes their own faction for the game, but they were simply unable to do so. As such, you get a kind of strange compromise, where you see these city-states all linked together, all linked in their hatred of Macedonia. It kind of works, it's kind of a little bit insane too. But on that note, we should probably have a look at what they're like in the game itself and figure out our best strategy. Here we are then with the Imperial campaign for the Greek cities, and yeah, my oh my, they are a weird faction, aren't they? We've already seen just how separated all of these regions are, not a single land border between them. So to look them up, of course, we're going to need to look at our army and use that well. So as it says here, many hoplite phalanxes, and that is really our big strength. They are, though, just a little bit one-dimensional. We'll get into that in more detail when we do our Battlefield Strategy Guide. That's coming out on the Tuesday following this. But we should probably focus on some of the good points here, because we do have ourselves a fantastic economy as Greece. It's not too bad right at the start. We have ourselves the Colossus of Rhodes. With all these rebel settlements around and some potential conquests as well, we can get a boom in economy very quickly indeed. The Aegean is a brilliant trade hub, really the richest area in the game to my mind. So without any further ado, let's get into the game and have a little look at that starting situation. Here we are then, back with the Greek city-states at the start of the game, and they are just a world of opportunities and a world of potential problems. Yeah, we're going to have to try and figure out where our priorities lie, and there are so many different ways that you can actually go about this campaign. But for me, the overriding feeling is that the Romans are just incessant. They will come for you time and time again. So really, we're going to have to figure out a plan to go and deal with them. But the more pressing matters is probably slightly closer to home. We can get ourselves all sorts of good ports around Kydonia, Halicarnassus, and of course Athens. Athens herself will be a key early pickoff for us, in part because we don't want the Macedonians to get it, in part because it gives us that much more strength in the Aegean. We need that economy of ours to get going. And that really brings me straight on to what I would suggest you do, which is get the port built. Pergamum, Sparta, Termon. Port. That is going to be huge. A, because you've got yourself fantastic trading networks around here. And B, of course, you start with the Colossus of Rhodes. 40% to naval trade. Get that going nice and early on and you'll be laughing. Athens obviously falls into that category, and so I would suggest also does Kydonia. The temptation to come and eat up all of these eastern rebel settlements is quite high, although I would probably suggest it's best to hold back on that front. See, if you go take Nicomedia nice and early on, all that's going to happen is Pontus will probably attack you. That's essentially their first move in the game, and Ankara will follow shortly afterwards. I would probably suggest just let them go and get it. Pergamum is a bit too isolated. We're going to have lots of problems with the Romans. Probably best just let this be a quiet economic hub for you. Byzantium's a similar story. You'll probably find the Thracians are going to go for it very early on, although I would say I'd be more tempted by this. It's got itself a nice and easily accessible port back to the Aegean. It's got itself timber and gold. It's actually quite a good settlement, and of course will be linking up to land that you'll pretty soon have with any luck. Aside from Athens then, I would suggest Kydonia and Halicarnassus are going to be key cities for you to grab. I wouldn't exactly rush to Halicarnassus, but certainly I'd want it rather than the Seleucids. With quite a strong garrison, it's going to be able to hold them off without too many problems. And to be honest, you can probably get a bit of bribery in both of these towns to get them. Either way, they're going to be a key in terms of getting all of your ports open and getting that trade network flowing. Once you've got that economy, you're going to be hard to stop. Let's look a little bit more specifically at what we've got in our cities though, because Sparta is an intriguing one. Certainly, the Spartan hoplites are a unit that we all know and love, and we need to make sure we use them well. These guys are going to smash it in auto-resolve, and obviously if you're taking the fights on yourself, you want to make sure you're making the best use of them. But more importantly, it's the fact that this place is very good for recruitment at the start. You have hoplites already available, very solid unit indeed, but more importantly, we have the city barracks, which can in 4 turns get us the armoured hoplites. Now with these guys in battle, particularly at the start of the game, you are going to rip people apart. So it's very much something you want to consider. How early are you going to get that city barracks? Obviously, as a key military hub, you're going to want the Temple of Nike to get upgraded too. This is something you'll want to think about in good time, as well as the wooden palisade. You can very much expect naval invasions from the Romans over here, so do get that wall. You do not want to get caught out. As for Termon, it's got itself a basic set of units, but notably some Cretan archers. Fantastic unit. They will be tearing apart the Romans and any units at the start of the game, and to be honest, they're pretty darn good even in the late game. Keep those guys safe and you can definitely defend this from the Romans. What I would suggest though is Apollonia is not a good place to go and snipe off. Yes, you can go and get it, but it's too small, you won't be able to defend it very readily. I would suggest use Termon as your defensive base in the short term until you can launch a counterattack towards the Romans. Over in Pergamum, I want to go and make sure that I can see the lay of the land. A few watchtowers will definitely do. I want to get my diplomat over here to talk to Sardis, and also to go and find the Pontics, get some trade rights, and hopefully we can have a nice peaceful Pergamum that can become a trade hub. Rhodes is an interesting little island because essentially it's going to be fairly safe. No one really attacks it apart from the odd invasion from Egypt, and eventually the Romans if they've already grabbed some of these other settlements. But basically it's going to be a pretty happy little town. I might actually go and send these troops across the seas on the boat here. If I can go get myself a bit low tax rate, an extra unit, I can send these guys over towards Athens and grab that. That will allow me to go and send one of the boats over to grab Sparta's forces, and they can go and help Termon against the Romans. Syracuse itself is an interesting prospect because you do start with a pretty solid army, as well as some stone walls to guard yourself from the Romans. Now Dionysius of Sparta himself is actually pretty good. He's got himself Inventor to help you go and besiege the cities, and of course you want to make use of the extra mining income when you find the right settlement for him. Even on easy mode, as early as turn 3, the Scipioni have decided to attack Syracuse. This is an inevitable war, and of course that brings you into conflict with the Brutii as well. So if you've gone to go and collect Apollonia, I'm sure you're going to be attacked very, very soon. Best plan then is to definitely go for the Romans. I would suggest best plan is to go and attack Messana, and also to make sure that you can take on the Brutii nice and early. You're going to be in an early war, so perhaps it wouldn't be the best idea to get into war with Macedonia as well. It's your choice. If you think you can take both on, then great. They will inevitably attack you at some point, but I think it's worth holding off just a tiny bit of time to make sure that you've got a few things ready. The Romans are just truly relentless on very hard, especially if you are Greece or Carthage. We saw last time with Carthage that the Brutii would just turn up at Thapsus on turn 4. Well, we've got very similar things here. Even after taking Messana, they are landing new fleets and new armies every other turn. Going to keep on battering them away until we destroy them. The same thing over here in Greece. Thermon is being attacked by the Brutii. They haven't even bothered taking Epirus yet, but they've gone straight for here. Even the Julii on the action is actually kind of ludicrous at this point. I mean, as I said, very much like with Carthage, when you play on very hard, the AI just goes straight for you, and your only response is to take out Rome. So try and keep Macedonia on side in the short term. They will turn as well, but at least short term, get these Romans pushed back a little. The sheer aggressiveness of Rome in this forces your hand. You're going to have to be aggressive and take the war to them. That doesn't mean, however, I think you need to play it in a full total war. Nicomedia and Corinth can both easily fall in the first couple turns, but then you're going to get yourself into far too many wars. Let's just focus on Rome and go and smash them up. But if you do want to do a full-on Blitz campaign, then I suggest you take a quick look at Old Total Warriors campaign. He gets full victory, the 50 settlement domination of Rome in 14 turns. He has excellent knowledge of the game. It's not exactly high-paced action or commentary, but it is brilliantly executed. Let's take a closer look at the forces at Syracuse and Messana then, because certainly if you want to do well, we're going to have to go and push the Romans back a little. We need to be on the front foot. So this force here is capable of beating this army, but really if you're going to do this right on turn 1 or 2, you do need to be an experienced player. We're actually going to look specifically at this battle in the battle guide on Tuesday, but for now I will just simply suggest that getting the mercenaries is a very good place to start. Here we are on turn 5 then, and you'll notice there's a good opportunity over here. Quite frequently what you'll see the rebels do, especially on Cydonia and Halicarnassus, is go and send most of the army out. That gives you a good opportunity, if you can't afford to buy the town, to just go and buy the unit itself. Now we've got 10,000 denarii right now, so we're going to go have a little look if we can afford that. So yeah, 6,000. So we can buy the army for only 6,000, and that should be plenty to go and then take the town. One of your Cretan archers, we've got our own Cretans, we've got the hoplites as well. We'll be able to get those into battle nice and easily. Even the auto resolve will do the job. So there we are. If you can't actually afford to buy the town outright, do notice that Cydonia and Halicarnassus have some really good opportunities here. Let's have a quick look at Halicarnassus instead then. So if we go and move our diplomat over there, then we can go have a chat with these chaps. Now, having just tried this, I've noticed we can't actually bribe them. Now, the money we've got here, the 10,000, is just what I've got from a few turns of playing the game. Greece's economy is very good with all these ports, and particularly with the Colossus of Rhodes, of course. So you can afford these things quite early. I'm just going to add a tiny bit more just to find out the exact amount of money that we are going to need for this. I'm just going to add another 10,000 denarii. This time we should be able to bribe this chap as well. So yeah, just over 10,000, 10,040, we'll see him join us. So if you like, and if you can't afford to bribe the whole city, then do bear in mind these two guys do generally jump out of the city. It's a good chance to bribe them and take the city nice and easily. what you're really looking for in this campaign is to find a way of getting an army over to southern Italy. Either you obviously want to repel the attacks on Messana and blockade them inside Capua, or you need to defeat the armies that will land over here and send your army this way. Whichever way it goes, one army is probably going to be distracting, the other one's going to be making their little pounce. And indeed, the little underbelly of the Brutii is very soft indeed. Magna Graecia is almost always very weakly defended because our armies are going over to attack you all the time. So realistically, you might be able to snipe at the Brutii before they've even begun the game. There are of course so many different approaches to playing as Greece, but for me it really comes down to how annoying the Brutii are, landing those fleets everywhere. So let's just get rid of them. It's around about turn 10, and that means the biggest nuisance is gone. Good news indeed. Yes, just a little rebel force standing outside Messana to take care of. You'll notice that naturally my boats have eventually been beaten back by the Scipione. That's kind of natural, but it has bought us time to get ourselves a foothold. And now most of the armies that attack us should hopefully come down here, and we'll have a little bit of a chance to build things up to launch our main assault on the rest of Italy. But yes, you might have noticed over here that Macedonia have attacked Apollonia. This is about as long as you can probably expect before they stab you in the back. At the very least though, our economy is now ridiculously strong. If you look at how we're going, yeah, just ridiculous profits each turn. And Sparta has actually got up to armoured hoplites at this point, and we're one turn away from the Temple of Nike getting us 2 experience. So quite honestly, we can probably do a good bit of defending, reorganise our troops, and start moving on from here. When it comes to the building browser, the Greeks are in a very good position indeed. They have themselves access to pretty much everything here, from the epic stone walls to the top level market and armoury, and really the only thing they're missing is the highways and the top tier of irrigation. Of course, the Ludus Magna is a great way of training up your generals, and their unique building the theatre helps along with the happiness, and it also just looks absolutely brilliant inside the cities. The other thing I want to bring your attention to though is back up near the top, because the minor cities will actually get you a lot of their best units. Armoured hoplites, as we've already looked at, come out of minor cities, but so do both of their cavalry units. When it comes to their temples, the Greeks are looking pretty strong with a wide variety of choices. So we start off in Sparta here and have a little look at the Temple of Nike. Now, more than any other temple, this is one of the ones you've really got to think where you put it, because you are going to be pumping out your troops out of this city here, or any city with the awesome Temple of Nike. You want it to have a good population, you want it to have good infrastructure. That means you can be pulling your troops out of the right place. Speaking of population growth then, we come on to the Temple of Aphrodite, which is an interesting one because it gets you up to 2% population growth. In fact, with the Pantheon, it even goes up to 2.5%. Now naturally, as soon as you're that sort of size, you don't want a big population growth anyway. Squalor becomes a huge problem and it becomes a painful mess. However, whilst I don't think it's particularly useful in the later stages, when you've got yourself a small, new, early city, particularly a young rebel city, getting the shrine to Aphrodite can be a very good way of just getting it creeping upwards. So I'd use these at the start of the game, occasionally on the odd place here or there, but I'd normally, by the time they're a minor city, scrap them for one of the other temple lines. On to the awesome Temple of Athena then, and this is the classic public order kind of temple. 20% to happiness, 20% to law. Do note that law is slightly better, it does reduce corruption, but this is naturally the kind of temple you use for somewhere where your public order is likely to need a bit of a buff. So that is always quite a simple choice to make, I think, particularly frontier territories, big Egyptian territories that you need to hold down. That brings us on to the awesome Temple of Hermes then, and much like Aphrodite and Nike, this will give you 20% to happiness, but instead this time it gives you an increase to tradable goods. And essentially I see this as the general option, the one that I'd pick if it's not going to be a military hub, and if it's not going to desperately need some public order. I'd probably just go for Hermes as my kind of default option. It's always a good to have. Of course, there's also the Pantheons at the end of the tree, and these are, as ever, a blend of all the different temples. But you've got to look at them a little bit carefully because we don't really want the growth bonus, especially when you're already 24,000 or higher. You get 2.5% with Aphrodite, but Hermes, notice, you don't get any. You actually get a public health bonus here, as well as the experience and the increase in tradable goods. This is actually brilliant at the final stage and probably my favourite of the four. Do note though, actually Nikkei is very good as well. Once you've got yourself extra law bonus, tradable goods and free experience of troops, this one's certainly looking brilliant as well. So how did it all go down for the Greek cities in history? Well, of course we all know that the Romans will end up conquering Greece, but there are a few twists and turns on the way. We have already discussed the Cremonidian War from around the start of the game, which of course gave Macedonia a stronghold over Greece. Realistically though, this changed very little, and the Greeks would manage to side with the Romans in the Macedonian Wars. Macedonia's land grabs in Illyria and Greece would get the attention of Rome, who really wanted to push them back and minimise their growing power. This meant that they allied with Pergamum and the Aetolian League against Macedonia. It would be at this point that Syracuse would fall, because the Second Punic War was happening at the exact same time, and Syracuse decided to side with the Carthaginians. This would soon mean the destruction of the city, and Archimedes, even with all of his magnificent siege equipment, would not be able to stop, and eventually the Romans would slaughter him and take over Syracuse. The Cretan War soon followed and saw the Seleucids and the Macedonians ally against Ptolemy. For Macedonia, much of this war was about attacking roads and their trade networks, and Rome warned Macedonia against further attacks, particularly after they attacked Athens. This ultimatum though was rejected, and Rome declared war once again. Whilst the Greek city-states would be able to hold out against Macedonia, as soon as Rome got involved, they wouldn't last long at all. The short-lived Achaean War would see Rome very quickly gain victory over independent Greece. Corinth was burnt to the ground in 146, the same year as Carthage. Rome had made a big statement. That leaves us with only the city of Pergamum, and the Attalid dynasty itself was very much coming to an end. Only a decade later, in 133, Attis III would have no heir and would give over Pergamum to Rome. While some of the kingdom was split with Pontus and Cappadocia too, Rome got the majority of the region we see here in the game. And with that, Greece, the Greece we see in the game here, had completely fallen to Rome. And as they say, the rest is history. Before we finish up for today though, let's have a little look at a couple campaign ideas you could do if you want to be a little bit more creative. One way of playing as the Greek cities is to play an evacuation campaign. Essentially what we're doing is taking some of our troops from Syracuse and fleeing them away as soon as possible. What that means is we don't get into war with the Romans. Because we've also given away our territories over in Greece, hopefully they won't be landing here anytime soon. What this means instead, we've got a stronger Macedonia, will hopefully hold off against Rome for a little bit longer, and who knows, maybe do something well. And I was kind of hoping that Carthage might do something because I gave Syracuse to them, but they've already lost it, so we'll ignore all of that. What we're left with though is having ourselves a lovely little empire over here in Asia Minor. We can kind of get on with a much slower campaign with far fewer theatres of war. One way you could roleplay as the Greek cities is to be the colonial puppet master, because as you can see from this map here, Greece had a huge amount of colonies all around the Mediterranean, and quite a number of those cities are in the game. So I've started a little game here. You can see that I've got certain cities like Cyrene, like Massilia over here, like Chersonesos, all are now Greek. And of course playing this way is an intriguing one because you end up even more stretched than you already are, so it can be a very silly way to play. Thank you very much for joining me on this campaign strategy guide to the Greek city-states. Of course, there will be the battlefield strategy guide coming out on the Tuesday after this, so do look out for that as well. And in the comments below, if you'd like to put any comments about which factions you'd like to see in the future, that would be grand. I do like to follow your suggestions. I probably will be doing Britain very soon after doing my campaign as them, but of course I'm looking to do more and more of these, so do put any that you would like to see. But for now, I will leave you. I am Thomas, this is Nerds to Human, and this has been the Campaign Strategy Guide. Thank you, and goodbye. Death and violence will come to you. This is a beautiful, beautiful town, by the way, guys. Let's go and smash it up. Dum tum ti 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 ti. How did you die? What is happening to my men? Steve! He was the one man who tried!